Welcome to Full Court Unscripted with your host, Marky. That's me, by the way. Basically, we just need to address the controversial things that happened or that is still happening in the series between Spurs and OKC. Look, there's a lot of things that I want to get into. The main three things I want to talk about is, of course, the officiating of the entire series. The Spurs also have some major things that they need to work on in order for them to win a game 6, possibly a game 7. So there's a lot to go over, with you. But main question is, are the refs influencing the series in favor of OKC? I don't know. Look, first of all, I just want to talk about, other than the refs having some issues with some calls that they're blind of, Spurs, I'm just talking specifically in game 5, they shot at 29.2% from 3. And OKC shot 43.8%. 14 of 38 OKC and 12 of 41 for the Spurs. There's a huge, huge difference in that. Now, obviously, there was a lot of calls in that game that were not called at all. Now, could that have helped the Spurs possibly win the game? Of course. But we can't ignore the fact that the Spurs need to get better with their threes. Now, a big problem with that, though, is Spurs are settling for threes only because OKC has figured out how to take Wemby out of the paint. When you take Wemby out of the paint, it's so much easier to just chunk up threes because there's no one that can go in the paint. If Wemby can go in the paint, no one can go in the paint. But with Wemby being like 7'5", it should be so easy to go inside the paint and score. But they have like smaller guards that are heavier that will keep them out of the paint. And you have Hartenstein as well that will keep Wemby out of the paint as well. They're doing a good job. There's some times where they don't do a good job, right? Obviously, the Spurs, they won twice in this series. But half the time Wemby is being brought out so he could shoot threes. Now, if he's inside the paint, there's a lot of fouls that are going to happen on Wemby because he's literally 7'5". He can just dunk over people. He can just lay it up over people. Like, it's not a big deal. So that's why there's a lot of fouls in favoring for the Spurs, because I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But basically, OKC has physical defenders that push it. It makes it harder for the Spurs to even go inside the paint. So when Wemby's inside, the defense has to collapse. There's no easy shots on threes because if Wemby's not in there, there's no one in there. And then when you start settling for threes, they're all contested. No one's trying to double team Wemby inside the paint because he's not even in there where he can pass it to the open man. So it just doesn't make it easier for the Spurs. It makes it easier for OKC. Now, my thing is, I'm not too smart when it comes to like how to figure out what Spurs has to do, but I know Mitch Johnson and all of the other coaches, they need to do something about this. Like, they need to really dive deep and understand how can they solve this issue. If they solve this issue, by the way, they win the series. They win the series by far. It would make everything super easier for the Spurs. All the shooters on an outside three will click. I mean, no one's going to be hindering the offense from the Spurs. But here's where things get even worse for the Spurs. We have to talk about DeAaron Fox. DeAaron Fox getting paid $50 million this year, not counting the other 3 years that he signed for the Spurs. 4-15 from the field last game. 9 points. When he was in playoffs in Sacramento, he was averaging 27 points per game. He was clutch. He had no missteps. He was going all out full throttle. And in this series versus OKC, or just in general, actually, he's doing 17.4 points per game. Now, that's a huge difference. That's a very huge difference. And the reason why is this guy is an all-star. You have two all-stars. You have Wemby and you have DeAaron Fox. Now, when Wemby can't get it going, DeAaron Fox has to step up as the offensive guy. That's why Spurs gave him that huge contract, because he's clutch. And in this series, and even in the other series against Timberwolves, against the Portland Trailblazers, there was only maybe 1 or 2 games that he had that were really great. Other than that, and I know he's the second option now. He's not first option. So I understand that there's going to be less shots, and especially that Spurs has, a few more players that run a little bit more deep where they can add a few more shots. But when nothing is going offensively, DeAaron Fox needs to get the ball and shoot it and be a hooper. Like that's just what it is. When you're playing in Gold's Gym, and I know this is the NBA, in Gold's Gym, like it gets tough in there. If you know that your team is down, everybody is on defense, on lock. Everyone is locked in. It's just, I don't see that from him. I don't see the aggressiveness. I don't see any of that. He's the highest paid Spur. It's crazy to think that these younger players that have their contracts are so much smaller, and they're playing with hunger. They're playing with more hunger than DeAaron Fox, who has $50 million in the bank this year. But that's second thing about the Spurs that needs to change in order for Spurs to even have a chance to win Game 7 or Game 6, and go to the finals. Now, you can't leave the offense to a bunch of freshmen, sophomores, and juniors in the league. Like, that's what's happening. You got Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, Wemby. They're all freshmen, sophomore, juniors. And then you got a veteran like DeAaron Fox who's not showing up. So, and now to the part everybody's arguing about, and really everybody meaning the world versus OKC fans. So in the game that I saw last night, the game was cut to 8. The Spurs got cut. I mean, they were down by 20, and they cut it to 8. And they were hitting on all cylinders. Defense and offense was clicking. Now, there was a certain point in time where once we cut it to 8, Spurs, they, and I say we because I am a Spurs fan, but anyways, the Spurs cut the lead to 8, and they missed the goaltend call on Cornet. Now, I'm like, okay, they missed it. That sucks because it was right then, and it was right there in front of the ref's face. But also, there's a bunch of replays all over national television, so everybody sees it. And then the out of bounds call on Chet's foot, and then it's their ball. And then the refs decided to do something weird. They huddled together to see if that was the right call or not. So Mitch Johnson and the Spurs staff were going to challenge it, but they didn't challenge it because they were waiting to see if the refs were going to change it, so that way they don't waste their challenge. And then they ended up trying to use it because the refs are like, nah, it hit Chet's foot, but it's still OKC's ball. So Mitch Johnson's like, I'm challenging it. He literally says it in the video. Challenge. And that ref just looked straight at him and said, play on. Then Mitch Johnson gets a technical, which Shea shoots free throws. The thing is all of this happened when we were coming up and we were only down by 8 points. So it stopped that big time. And I think that's what is the main thing about these refs officiating. And I don't know if they're getting paid to do what or not, but all these conspiracy theories, it's like, how can you not be fair? How can you not look up as a ref? Oh, snap, I see the replay. I was wrong. And make a call. I don't know if that's delay of game, but I think that's what should happen. But anyways, you just got a bunch of things that are happening. Even Reggie Miller and Jamal Crawford on national television were questioning all of the calls. And I don't know if they're OKC haters or anything like that, but they were calling stuff that was also on the Spurs where the refs didn't get. Now, 1 or 2 missed calls a game, that makes sense. Okay, that's fine. But when there's a consistent amount of calls that are not being called in favor for the Spurs, but there's a lot of flopping going on with OKC, it just does not make sense. It just doesn't make sense. This flopping, and I know Jared McCain elbowed Dylan Harper in the neck. And then he decided to, I feel Dylan Harper behind me. Let me just go ahead and lay down on the floor. He lays down on the floor, and it's a foul on Dylan Harper. It just makes no sense how we see it as audience viewers. We see what's going on, but the refs are swallowing the whistle. They're not saying anything. OKC just doing the foul baiting, the rage baiting, and they're getting rewarded. And that's why I think Mitch Johnson, Stefan Castle, they're calling out the refs. They're calling them out for not as much calls, because let me tell you this. Yes, Spurs fans have a lot more fouls than called on them than OKC, but here's the thing. The fouls on OKC are flops. Not all of them, but most of them are flops, while the Spurs calls is because they're being aggressive and they're actually being fouled. Now, again, there's 1 or 2 calls that don't make sense on the Spurs side, which I agree, but most of the calls are because they're getting a Shaq, which not really Shaq because they can all shoot some free throws, but it's just crazy. But I mean, the thing is the Spurs are definitely in trouble if Fox and the 3-point shot doesn't go through. They need to have a 10 to 15 point lead in order for the Spurs to advance to the finals. They need that 10 to 15 point lead, because if in the event the refs are acting up again, they have a 10 to 15 point cushion throughout the entire game. They have to keep that so that way they could win, which is crazy. They have to either have a beautiful night on 3. They have to have Wemby, the solution of what's going to happen with him inside the paint. Or if DeAaron Fox comes out strong, that opens the door for Wemby on offense as well, because they're going to be guarding DeAaron Fox if he's shooting on all cylinders as well. So these 3 things are the only things that are going to keep the Spurs alive in order for them to advance. As much as I like our deep bench, they're young. Except for Keldon Johnson, I know, but they're all young. They're rookies. Pretty much everybody coming off the bench is a rookie, except for, Keldon Johnson and Harrison Barnes. But everybody knows about what Harrison Barnes is like during the playoffs, and that's why he gets limited time. But my question is, did the refs influence this series? Is OKC simply better than the Spurs? OKC in 6, Spurs are OKC in 7. Let me know what your thoughts are. If there's anything that you just want to release to the comments section, just let me know. But something definitely feels off, and we'll see what happens in Game 6.